and welcome to another edition of the GCCI Business Review. This television program is an initiative of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry to bring to the fore national topical events that affect the private sector in general, the general public, and members of the chambers in particular. I am Lance Hines, Senior Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce and the moderator for tonight's program. Welcome again. Our discussion this evening will focus on the effective use of alternative energy resources. Joining us for this discussion this evening are two guests, Dr. Mahendra Sharma, Chief Executive Officer, Guyana Energy Agency, Mr. Bobby Gosai Jr., Senior Policy Analyst, Advisor, Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment. Gentlemen, let me, on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, welcome you and thank you for taking the time out to participate in a public discussion that is so critical to the country's future development. Perhaps for the benefit of the audience, it might be useful for us to just get an initial perspective on what both agencies do in this area. So we'll start with Dr. Sharma, and perhaps you can provide some insight in terms of what the Guyana Energy Agency is currently doing in this, as it pertains to alternative energy and the related initiatives.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hines. The Guyana Energy Agency is a semi-autonomous body that is focused on encouraging the development of new and renewable sources of energy. I think the vision statement quite succinctly captures the essence of what we do, which is to provide reliable energy in an economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable manner to Guyanese in general. As you are aware, and as viewers may be aware, we have been traditionally reliant on fossil-based fuels, petroleum imports, gasoline, diesel, fuel oil. Right now, the majority of our electricity generation comes from heavy fuel oil and some diesel. There's a small production of energy from the bagasse, from the sugar industry, but it's only of the order of 5%. We have been pursuing an alternative energy path for quite some time now. I think the recent developments with the Amhila Falls Hydro would have certainly elucidated those areas of interest. In Guyana, we have a vast majority of hydropower potential. In the 1970s, we looked at over 7,000 megawatts of power available. We have a significant amount of sunshine. We're on the equator. So hydro, solar power, solar photovoltaics, solar thermal for water heating. There's been some studies done on wind that we've been looking at. There's a significant amount of biomass potential that we have been looking at as well. Wood waste, biogas, and energy efficiency has been a big area for us, a big focus point, because a kilowatt hour saved and a unit of energy saved is a unit of energy that you don't need to develop. So we also see energy efficiency as a critical component of the entire energy sector.
Okay. Mr. Gosai?
Thank you for having me here. The Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment is, as you would know, the latest ministry which was developed in 2011, December 2011. Under the ministry, there are a host of agencies which fall under our purview, such as the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, the Guyana Gold Board, the Guyana Forestry Commission, National Parks Commission, the Protected Areas Commission, Wildlife Management Authority, the Environmental Protection Agency. And recently, we've created the Guyana Mining School and Training Center. As it relates specifically to the workings of energy, we try to bring it very close in terms of the natural resource and environmental management of the country. We work very closely with the Office of the Prime Minister as well as the Guyana Energy Agency to ensure that we promote the level of energy efficient level of output when it comes to especially the mining industry. One of the things we try to encourage, especially as we move into large-scale operations in the natural resources sector, is try to provide the investors with an option of alternative sources of energy, if possible, that they can develop. It does not necessarily have to be in the form of hydroelectric power, but we also try to encourage them to look at the best way of doing business. One of the critical components of doing business in the natural resources environment is your energy costs. So we encourage a forum like this, and we hope that viewers out there can understand that the level of work that the ministries do, because it's a wide array of agencies we cover, and our work is quite cross-sectional.
Okay. Clearly, there is a lot of work being done. Is there an overarching framework as it pertains to the use of alternative energy? Are we saying at a national level, are we saying at a government level that by 2020, for example, we want to reduce the use of fossil fuels, let's say by 30%, 40%, 10 years after where we're heading and stuff like that? And if we're going to use alternative energy, what are the key resources we're going to use? Is it hydro? Is it wind? Is it solar? Is it a combination of those? I mean, is there any framework as we speak or a policy that addresses those kinds of issues?
Yes, in fact, Guyana was one of the first in the regions to have an articulated energy policy. 1994, a policy was drafted, and that document is available on our website. From 1994 to now, there have been a number of other documents, like the National Development Strategy, like the Low Carbon Development Strategy. There's a Power Sector Implementation Investment Strategy. And the GEA has also been preparing its own 5-year outlook, looking at key strategic actions that can advance the energy policy. You speak of targets. And while it's always useful to measure, because what is measured gets done, we have to look at targets in the context of where we were, where we are now. And the Amila Falls Hydro obviously presented a significant transformation project.
Right.
So one may say that that target was of the order of 90% conversion from fossil dependence to renewable energy. The numbers in the 1994 policy are outdated, and there is need for updating. But the core elements of the policy still remain the same, which are to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and to encourage the development of new and renewable sources of energy.
Back to the Ministry of Natural Resources for a second. Certainly, there's got to be a benefit as you manage the natural, as you manage the forests, as you manage the mining sector, as you manage all the extractive industries that you have. Certainly, it is in your interest to make sure that these are done in a sustainable manner and encourage the entities that are participating in these activities to move forward and use the most responsible means of generating power and so on. I mean, has the ministry actually looked at providing those kinds of guidelines, or right now is it just a matter of kind of encouraging them to go down this path, or are you actually at a stage where we could say, well, look, from now on, if you're coming in, you must make an effort. If solar is required, if whatever is required, are we going down the road as part of an overarching process towards using alternative resources?
Sure. One of our policy guidelines is to encourage investors to ensure that the manner in which they do work in the natural resources or environmental sector is beneficial not only to themselves, but to the community in which they are working in. At the level of the ministry, we encourage the emphasis that we encourage is on sustainable development. Now, sustainable development, one of the key pillars of sustainable development is the environment.
All right.
One of the things we do, we try to respect the environment as much as possible. In other parts of the world, people may tell you it's kind of a bit of a conflict to have the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment in one administration. But we think it is necessary to have that level of collaboration so that when you encourage persons to work in the natural resources area, you also encourage them to respect the environment. And one of the things which we have strive on, is to ensure that investors look at alternative means of development. One of the things which the government of Guyana, through the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment, did earlier this year is that we collaborated with Trinidad and Tobago on a memorandum of understanding to provide technical level of exports, not only in terms of oil and gas, which we are hoping to have within the next 5 to 10 years in Guyana, but also to look at alternative energy and training in alternative energy uses. So at the ministry level, we are not only looking at it at a micro level in terms of each business by itself or each sector by itself, but also at a national scale, where we can work with other agencies within the sector, such as the GE or the Office of the Prime Minister, or any other related agency to promote that level of energy efficient Guyana. The guiding document for the country at this point in time as it relates to national development is the LCDS.
Right.
A key pillar of the LCDS is to develop proper methods of energy supply and sustainable energy supply over time. So these are the reasons why Mahendra was speaking towards our policy as it relates to finding alternative sources and such, and also try to promote sustainable development.
Okay.
Government has done quite a bit to, in 2012, an order was passed to allow solar panels, deep cycle batteries, inverters, equipment used for the generation of alternative energy to be free of duty and VAT at point of import. That also included making CFLs and LED lamps duty and VAT free, which I think are significant steps to demonstrate government's commitment to a renewable energy future and one that promotes energy conservation and energy efficiency. The GEA has been doing energy audits. There's a project with the Guyana Manufacturing Services Association, GMSA, that has established 5 pilot studies to look at ways in which industrial energy consumption can be addressed and how those experiences can inform national policy. Hydropower is the elephant in the room. Hydropower is obviously a significant source of energy for Guyana. And without its development, we would really be just scratching the surface. Solar is important. Solar is still relatively expensive. We have what they call a grid feed-in demonstration project at the GEA. What this project does is that it captures the sun's energy, it senses what our building is using, and it takes the difference from the grid. And it measures the amount of energy you generate from the solar panels, it measures the amount of energy the building uses, and it measures the difference that you took from the utility company. And the concept is called net metering, and you can have a look at it. We are promoting this kind of thinking, and our next step is to use this experience, to use this demonstration to craft policies, to encourage that level of alternative energy in cooperation within companies. And I think that, in essence, is a unique opportunity for private sector. We started with solar photovoltaics, but it doesn't have to be limited to solar PV. It can certainly include wind. It can certainly include biomass for those industries, sawmillers, that generate wood waste. We're looking towards setting up a small pilot to demonstrate how cost-effective it would be to convert your wood waste into usable energy, whether for your facility or for maybe even sale to the grid. But these are many thoughts that are currently in the making, and we're hoping that we can have a policy decision on it.
I was looking at your website just as a prep for the discussions that we're going to have today. Clearly, we can see the numerous studies that have been done, certainly on the possibility of sustainable hydroelectric power. Those studies go back to about 1955, I think, if I look correctly. Out of that, you then identified about 60 locations where you and I guess this was my curiosity. Is it that those 60 locations are potential areas for implementing hydropower solutions? So, for example, from an investment perspective, just briefly, can I come in and take a look at those and say, well, look, maybe this is somewhere we can do that, and how we do that? Are the studies to the point where I can actually see as an investor, but this is a location that could generate hydropower, and some thought as to how I deliver that to the grid, or if I deliver it to our community and stuff like that?
Right. So yes, you're quite correct, and thank you for the research, and I hope you had a good experience on the GEA website. There are about 6 or 7 sites that were identified in the 1970s by Montreal Engineering. These 6 or 7 sites were further divided. In fact, they were studied based on the river basins that they were present in. Out of the 6 or 7 sites that were catalogued, 15 were further selected for pre-feasibility type studies. And then a further 3 were studied up to the feasibility levels. Amaila, Kaichor, and Chumachamari were the 3 that were studied to that level. The simple answer is yes. There's quite a bit of information that is available, but you do have to respect the fact that those studies were done in the 70s,
Right.
and there would be need to update. Technology has changed
Of course.
in those years, so there's going to be need to update them. We are currently looking at, in fact, doing an update of one of the studies called the Wamakaru site in Region 9, to maybe look at the potential for providing additional power to the Lethem community. And it too needs to be updated. So even though the study is there, and these studies we can make them available to private sector interests, all it takes is maybe an email or a visit to the GEA's office. We've started scanning them, so those hard copy documents we now have as PDF documents, so it's easier to distribute. So the simple answer is yes, there is information available. They do not have to start from zero information, and that can be made available.
So we've spoken about the alternatives. We've spoken about what is possible and what is thing. Are we at a point where we can say that hydropower is the underpinning or the foundation? Is it and it is a solution that we must have, or are we still contemplating all options to see what it is that at a sustainable level?
That's a resounding
provide the
yes.
service?
It's a resounding yes. There's no doubt in my mind that hydropower is a significant solution to Guyana's energy situation. We obviously don't want to be dependent on only one type of energy, so you should not make yourself vulnerable. Hydropower is influenced by the water cycle. The water cycle, as much as we like it to be dependent, is governed by Mother Nature and several other factors. While we can design a few things out, the more you need to reduce the risk, the higher your costs tend to be. So hydropower is a major component of Guyana's energy future. But that does not mean we do not focus on the other options, like maybe generating energy from the other sugar estates. I think there is potential of between 5 to 10 megawatts from each of the remaining sugar estates, in addition to Skelton, who in fact has a 30 megawatt installed capacity for cogeneration, and is currently selling power to GPL through a power purchase agreement. So we see that the need for incremental power demands will not grow by 100 megawatts overnight. So once we've satisfied our base load, which is what a Milo is intended to do, provide about 140 megawatts, 150 megawatts of power to meet that demand, which is about 109 megawatts now. And we saw that number was quite in line with the growth levels that were projected. So by the time the Milo is ready to generate power, by the time it's ready for commercial operation, it would be at a level where it can handle some growth and provide the power needs of the country. Not to be complacent, you also want to have diversity in your energy supply. Remaining dependent on one energy source obviously makes you vulnerable. So looking at bagasse and biomass to energy obviously are areas that we need to look at.
I think there's a Hinterland project going where you're providing solar panels to the various communities in the Rupununi and places south and further south. What would be the end game of that? Because you're doing two things. You're providing independent solar power in those communities that need it, and then you're also looking in those areas to look at the possibility of providing hydropower and related services. Those two, you believe, dovetail quite easily, together in terms of ultimately where you want to go as far as the services in those areas.
To answer that question, we'll have to get site specific. But generically speaking, those very remote communities will be too far away from the national grid to benefit from hydropower. Right. There may be some communities that are within certain geographic areas that can access the transmission line. The other issue too is the cost that goes into putting down a substation to deliver power to the size of the load, and it has to be, there's an economic number that influences that. The 11 to 15,000 solar photovoltaic systems that have been done on the low carbon development strategy is an important step in the direction of sustainable energy dependence for Guyana. And I think that project is either completed or close to completion. Now it's being implemented by the Office of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has responsibility for energy and is the Minister of Energy. So, and that program, it provides solar photovoltaics, renewable energy, about 65 watts to those outlying communities.
One of the things that we try to encourage at a national level, within all the agencies and all the ministries, is to have community-based projects. So, for example, you have an investor trying to do some business in a remote area, and one of the things they would look at is to find the best alternative for the energy. And the first thing they would want to tell you is that X amount of the supply would go towards their business and the other would go to the community, which is what we encourage in Guyana. We want to have communities be powered so that they could be spill-off or positive external productive activities taking place. An emphasis should also be placed on the work, Mahendra mentioned it lightly, work being done by other agencies such as the Institute of Applied Science and Technology, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture, which recently they commissioned a demonstration plant on sugar and the alternative sources of energy out there. So there's a host of work being taken place to try to ensure that we don't become a country as your initial question was, within the next 20 to 30 years, we just become a country dependent on one alternative source or one source of energy, so to speak. So that we are looking at other activities that can take place over time within the next 10 to 15 years to see how best Guyana can become less dependent on, the importation of oil, which is what we currently do for, 99% of our energy, to just throw a number out there. So these are some of the initiatives being taken place across the board as it relates to the entire government sector, and also bringing in the private sector to play a pivotal role in encouraging investment in that arena.
Now I want to talk about us, where, the quote-unquote stakeholders in the society. So your private sector, your civil society, your public sectors, and so on. What is your gauge? Have we become more mindful of energy consumption? Looking as well, in terms of alternative sources and stuff like that. I have a company, like my colleagues in the chamber, and certainly one of the things that has always puzzled me is why is it that we're not really looking far more aggressively at looking at solar solutions and stuff like that. And it doesn't seem to have any sort of impetus to for us to look and see where we could save, where we could do. We tend to talk about the fact that the power is too expensive, but I don't know whether and whose responsibility is it? I mean, is it the GA to market it better, or is it you said you're working with GMSA at the moment, and certainly based on that, I'd like to invite you to certainly come and see us and have a similar type of thing. But you have to wonder sometimes, why is it that we are not why not taking this on, as much as we could, and even carried further than it is at the moment?
I think one of the simplest things that could be done, first of all, any business person will probably tell you, is to do their own generation. Is to buy a power plant and get the fuel themselves and work instead of working on the national grid. That used to be the encouragement, or that used to be the way it was in the business community about 10 years ago. But given the level of improved supply that has taken place within the last 7 to 5 years, a lot of businesses have now come on back into the national grid. In terms of getting your alternative sources, as Mahendra mentioned earlier, solar panel is one of the fastest setup that you could do. It's also one of the most expensive still in this part of the world. And persons trying to put in a couple of panels in place, and then they will have to look at the return over time, whether it will last 10 to 15 years or 20 years, or at the same time you also look at what is taking place in the national economy. You also look at is the price of oil going down, is it going up? Will my investment sustain itself over time or not? The encouragement has always been there to if you can, you should. But at the same time, you also look at the national policy. If proper energy is going to be supplied within the next 10 to 12 years, or whatever the case is, 5 to 10 years, then you would want to look at your long-term investment. And I think that is what has been happening in the investment community, so to speak. So when you come in, you look at what is the national grid, what is the national policy on energy, and how this will be phased over time, in terms of your level of investment. Any investor coming in, they want to make sure that they get a return on that investment, no matter how big or small it is. But at the same time, you want to look at your level of profitability over time.
Why is always a difficult question.
Of course.
I can speculate as to why businesses are not doing more conservation, more energy efficiency type investments. When we started looking at energy conservation, reducing our energy consumption, we needed to educate ourselves first. So we took some time to understand technology, get some working examples, do some energy audits, understand what these numbers look like. What are the real interventions that can make a difference?
Right.
You don't want to go and recommend North American standards that people don't have access to, the type of equipment, the type of sensors, the type of monitoring.
Right.
So there are a number of things that you can do. Let's start from the supply end. The prepaid meter is a wonderful tool for energy conservation.
All right.
Why? Simply because in real time, you can go and see what your power consumption is at any one time from a digital readout, from a consumer interface. And you can see how much energy that power translates to over a period of time. We don't realize quite often how much a particular appliance consumes until we actually see those numbers. And as I said, what gets measured gets done. And when you see those numbers, then you realize, hey, guy, I didn't realize. And little things like cell phone chargers that we leave plugged in, laptops, amplifiers, stereo systems, we leave in standby mode. Some of them do consume a fair amount. And when you add them up together in an entire home, the numbers are quite large. So we at the GA, we started educating ourselves and creating brochures, understanding. So when we go to individuals, we can say, look, guys, this is what you need to do. So we've created a number of brochures that we have on our website that you can download and that we can distribute to educate people on what they can do, what are these things that they can do to reduce their energy consumption. So that's one aspect. So knowing what you're consuming, knowing what you can do to reduce the consumption, and then doing. And that's where the problem is. Okay. The doing seems to be the issue. So we have taken a more hands-on approach. We can spend millions of dollars on information dissemination and advertisements and newspaper ads and radio ads.
Of course.
But if you don't take that information that we put out there and translate it into an action, then it's all pointless.
Let me thank both of you for spending the time with us today. This is the beginning, I hope, of a continuous and larger conversation about where we're heading. We are certainly happy to hear the kind of work that's being done. So again, let me thank you for coming. That's it for tonight's show. Let me thank. We have two new sponsors on. Quartz is agreed to sponsor some of the shows, and also the Republic Bank Guyana Limited. We thank the two of them for their support. On behalf of the Chamber, my name is Lance Hines, and good night. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you.